So, does jury decision rule have any effect on how the jury makes their decision? Nemeth's 1981 research suggests that the majority decision rule is associated with less participation by minority jurors, the majority jurors paying less attention to minority jurors, fewer hung juries, deliberation taking a shorter time, and perhaps problematically, a greater likelihood of conviction and more errors in recalling the evidence. Now, why is this? Well, because the jurors in the majority are not required to convince the dissenting minority about the correctness of the majority position, they can generally ignore the minority jurors. Therefore, they can avoid discussing the evidence in any great detail and just apply social pressure in an attempt to reach a majority of the required size. Okay, so it seems that juries operating under a majority decision rule are prone to making poorer decisions than those working under a unanimous decision rule. When discussing the nature of the majority that will be accepted, I mentioned that juries can come in different sizes. Now in Australia, New Zealand and some other jurisdictions, criminal cases are heard by juries of 12. In the United States of America, following the Supreme Court decision in Williams and Florida in 1970, as few as 6 jurors can hear a criminal case. Now, Thomas and Pollack in 1992 used probability theory to argue that 6 and 12-person juries are equivalent in terms of how they make their decisions. Researchers have also often used 6-person juries in their studies because logistically it's a lot easier to conduct studies on juries of 6 compared to 12. You need half as many people for a start. Now, unfortunately, the research suggests that juries of 6 and 12 do not function in the same way. 6-person juries communicate less, are less likely to recall the evidence accurately or examine the evidence thoroughly, and according to Sachs' 1977 research, are more likely to reach agreement. That is, they're less likely to hang. They're also less representative of the community, and they often return different verdicts and are more likely to convict. These issues were identified by Hans and Vidmar's 1986 research. Now, why is this? Well, one of the main reasons for these differences between juries of 6 compared to juries of 12 is conformity. Conformity occurs when people yield to real or imagined social pressure. Ash's 1955 study was important in highlighting how groups bring about conformity and illuminating the conditions that enhance conformity and those that diminish conformity. So let's look at Ash's paradigm. Ash gave a group of participants who took part in the study as a group a picture of a vertical line followed by a second picture of 3 vertical lines. Participants were asked in turn which of the 3 lines matched the length of the original line. In this example, the answer is clearly B. Now, in this study, all of the participants except one were actually working with the experimenter. So they weren't actually real participants. They were what we call confederates. All of the confederates responded before the real participant. And on some trials, the confederates all gave the correct answer, while on others they gave an obviously incorrect answer. For example, line A in our example. Ash was interested in whether the real participant would go along with the group and why. Ash found that the vast majority of participants, 76% in fact, went along with the group and conformed on at least one trial when the group was giving an obviously incorrect answer. Ash argued that there were 2 reasons why conformity occurs like this. The first is called normative influence. Here, the real participant maintains his or her private view about what the correct answer is, but conforms in public to avoid ridicule or social censure from the rest of the group. The second is called informational influence. If a person is not sure about what the correct answer is, the group's response helps the real participant to identify what the correct answer might be. Now, interestingly, in some studies, Ash varied whether the group gave a unanimous but incorrect answer or whether there was non-unanimity in the views of the rest of the group. We've seen in our example so far what a unanimous but incorrect answer would look like. The rest of the group chooses the same but incorrect response. Now, what happens, however, if some of the group chooses one incorrect response and the remaining group members choose another incorrect response? What will the real participant do in this situation when there's non-unanimity? Well, Ash's studies show us that when there is non-unanimity in the views of other group members, then the rate of conformity dramatically reduces. It is sufficient if only a single other group member disagrees with the majority. That single dissenter doesn't even have to agree with the real participant's response for conformity to be reduced. The dissenter simply just has to give a different response to the majority. So how does this relate to how juries deliberate and jury size? Well, let's try a thought experiment to illustrate this. Imagine a jury of 6 and a jury of 12. Now let's imagine that the rate of dissent in the general population about a particular issue is 1 in 6. If we select people from the general population to form these two juries, one made of 6 people and one made of 12 people, then we would expect that the rate of dissent to be represented in each jury like this. The 6-person jury will statistically have 1 person who dissents on this issue, and the 12-person jury will have 2 people who dissent. ASHA studies tell us that the pressure for conformity will be much greater in the 6-person jury compared to the 12-person jury because it is much more likely that a dissenter in the 6-person jury will be on their own. So the evidence suggests that jury deliberation does influence individual jurors and that 12-person juries working under a unanimous decision rule tend to be more systematic and thorough in their decision making. As such, we've heard that juries with certain characteristics make better decisions, and in the next video, we'll talk about whether juries as groups make better decisions compared to individual jurors.